And I'd like to invite a dear brother, one of the founders and the organizers of this whole event as well, Luke Cohen, who has been tracking this energetic and what's happening for the past decade, if not more. And he brings in a really interesting, multi-dimensional, multidisciplinary approach in how we can interface with this emergent reality. So please give it up for Luke Cohen, formerly known as Alokananda.
What's up, family? How's it going? Yeah, big love to David Casey. Known this brother for a long time. Thanks for all your work with Blockchain, brother, and all the epic stuff you're doing, and this other brother for his, journalism. We need good investigative journalism on the planet at this time. Did anyone else experience any fear or come up in your body in hearing about these potentials of like 5G and AI? Let's just by a show of hands. Nobody's wrong. Yeah. So, with these potential outcomes, these potential, what I understand them as timelines. I'm going to explain a little bit what my understanding of a timeline is, which is a potential reality that we could experience, and how we can interface with some of these scarier potentials for our planet with technology, and some of the agendas that are being played out that we can consciously interface with from a more empowered place and not go into fear. So I have a teacher that says, be aware, don't beware, be aware, right? So like this brother's raising awareness of something. The subject matter inherent in itself can create fear, but the awareness can allow us to transmute that fear in a way that brings us into an empowered relationship. Because a lot of times with these bigger narratives of 5G, all these other things, we can move into like a feeling of helplessness, like it's inevitable, there's nothing I can do to change it, all these things. And that's really what that kind of narrative has been implanted in us over the entire time that we've been in a society, that you're powerless, that there's nothing you can do to change certain things. What I want to introduce today is a multidimensional perspective of how to interface with these timelines. So a timeline, from my perspective, is a potential reality. Indigenous cultures have been speaking about this time that we're living in. There's multiple prophecies and other historical data that kind of points to this turning of an age of consciousness. So I want to introduce the energy of consciousness and bring it into that space of consciousness, that literally we're in a gigantic quantum experiment that our very energy can influence the outcome of. And if we take too much of a passive approach of just witnessing or giving our power away to some outside thing, then we're not necessarily participating with our consciousness at the level that we can. And so in a Hopi context or a Hopi worldview, from their perspective right now, according to their prophecies, there's 3 worlds that are simultaneously existing right now. There's the old world of the Trump and the Trumps of the planet, and this like hyper-capitalistic, hyper-masculine, not seeing the impact of the future based on short-term gain, things like that. There's this future, more utopian possibility that we're, kind of experiencing here on some level, people in connection and nature and celebration and art. And there's the in-between space. So if you can imagine a Vesica Pisces, which is 2 circles overlapping, that's the perspective. There's actually 3 worlds simultaneously existing. Now, in the broader sense of things, timelines, if we live in an infinite universe with literally infinite potential realities, infinite potential timelines that we can experience, how do you want to relate with these kind of subjects of AI and 5G if enough people are fully empowered, then we don't necessarily have to go down a certain road. And so there's this really unique choice point where our individual empowerment, our individual freedom, and the collective experience of empowerment and freedom are meeting each other in that transition of those 3 worlds. So, yeah, just take a second to close your eyes and just tune in to that when I'm sharing about multiple parallel realities, multiple potential outcomes, not as a non-scientific approach, but just explore it as an experiment. Use your imagination for a moment and embrace the possibility of infinite possibilities. And this is not just for our planet, but for you as a being and what you're choosing in your life and your work and your mission. What does it feel like to feel infinite potential outcomes based on the choices that you'll make. And I want you to go back and key choice points in your life that you've had. Maybe you got in a car once and then there was an accident and you were the only one that survived. Maybe there was an intuition not to go somewhere and that could have meant you not being in your body anymore versus being here. All these key choice points. And I remember having these experiences as a kid and being like, oh wow, what would my life be like if I didn't go to like the South Beach projects that day? Or what would my life be like if I didn't like choose to go to that college? You know, and I actually can feel, and I've learned to feel into like who I'd be if I didn't make certain choices in my life. So there's versions of you out in this infinite universe based on different choice points. And what that does, it actually gives you the power back to be so in charge of your choices and so responsible for your actions and your feelings and everything that you're interfacing with, that it's no longer like there's this external power over us that's driving the planet in this particular direction, and it gives you the power back to be the one driving humanity forward towards the timeline that you want to experience as an individual and what we want to create as a collective. And until we invite those potentialities, until we invite the full possibility of an empowered experience of a timeline that's really deeply connected to Earth, where these technologies are being informed by the deepest aspects of our soul, by spirituality, and not just profit-driven, control-driven agendas, what would that feel like? What does that world feel like for yourself, for your life, for your children? And so I guess essentially what I'm saying is, in the face of these potential darker timelines or these darker places that we could go as a humanity, you have the power to actually steer humanity in another direction. How many of you believe that right now? That you have the power to actually steer what's happening on the planet? How many of you are like, I don't know if I have that power yet. I'd like to think that, but like, I'm kind of like concerned. So just be honest, put your hands up. Thank you guys. So, how does this concept of infinite parallel realities feel for you guys? Does it feel wooey? Does it feel like, actually that feels like a real quantum reality? That's quantum physics, right, dude? Okay, yeah. Just like, give me a sense of how that feels for you. Just call out, speak to me, like share with your body. What does it feel like to tune into the multiple parallel realities, multiple potential outcomes? Does that feel real, or does that feel imaginatory? Brings you so present. Awesome. What else? Entangle. What does that mean for you? Part of it all. Awesome. Not separate. Yeah. So she's saying that when she was younger, she used to be like, are there other versions of me? Like, it reminded her of that nostalgia of like the kind of a soul level awareness when you were younger. Yeah, because a lot of us, you know, from my understanding, a lot of us chose to be here. Whether you remember making that choice or not as a soul, you're here and you have great purpose. And so, you know, I had my whole worldview change from 9/11. I lost a family member, and I studied investigative journalism in college and went kind of down a rabbit hole. There wasn't necessarily like quote unquote conspiratorial in the sense of like I didn't watch a bunch of YouTube videos and like be like, oh man, like it was more like reading scholarly articles and having conversations with professors about how our world works. That shifted my worldview. And because of that, I was more open to conspiracies as a result of that. And a lot of conspiracy communities and people that are getting into spirituality, you know, a lot of times, even like Guy MTV will talk about these things, and like this brother is talking about 5G and these potentials. A lot of times when these things get introduced, there's a lot of fear energy in them. And that's actually the energy that the beings that want these timelines to happen feed off of. They feed off of fear. What resolves fear? Love. And love that creates committed action and committed choices based on the preferred timeline that you want to experience. And so it becomes less about saving the world and more about choosing love in the face of a scary potential outcome and showing up differently than you would have. So from my perspective, how we shift these timelines, how we move out of making choices based on fear or feeding a fearful agenda around technology or any other potential outcome for humanity, we have to liberate ourselves. We have to free our own victim consciousness from our own bodies. We have to purge the lineage of fear that we've been passed down. No matter what heritage we have, fear has been passed down because we've survived some shit on the planet as beings. And so the cool contrast of these kind of potential outcomes, the intensity of our times, is actually the perfect formula to help excavate these kinds of victimization out of our body, to move the fear out of our body so that we can come into an empowered place and really choose the preferred reality that we want to move forward. So if enough people actually do that, then we have a collective shift, right? So many people focus really outward and want to change the world and like change how people think or change a collective. How many people, by show of hands, that's like the operating system? What does it feel like to actually focus completely on you? Like not in a selfish sense in making it all about you, but like what you want to experience. How does that feel as a contrast? Feels indulgent. Thank you. What else? Lead by example, so it feels good. So I think this is really important, and I know there's going to be contrasting perspectives on this. But from my experience, if I'm in fear, in face of a supposed scarier, darker agenda, how am I going to make choices that are actually congruent with the reality that I want to experience? And if I'm so focused outside of myself and what other people are doing, I'm essentially not taking full responsibility for my experience. And so in the face of these kinds of these conspiracies, I mean, there's everything from, we have one perspective, for people like David Icke and all these people, that there's actually reptilian beings on this planet that are not human, that are trying to terraform our planet, and they've hijacked consciousness essentially and want to keep humanity separated from their own divinity, their own sense of God force, their ability to be in co-creation with reality, co-creation. So that's one of many multidimensional perspectives out there. And these, you can do your research and explore, but what I'm essentially saying, no matter what worldview, if you're very pragmatic and business focused, or if you're very mystical, there's like a shared value system that we have, because we all want to see a better planet, and we all want to see a planet more in connection and love and creating new systems. And so no matter what your worldview is, my invitation to you is to come into the self-responsibility of transmuting fear and choosing empowerment, and then that will have more impact and inform more of the choices that will have greater impact on the whole than any fear-based responses to these things. I've seen a lot of light workers and empathic people and like essentially empowered people become disempowered by watching these conspiracy videos, by giving their power away to this outside darker force that's actually a shadow of humanity itself, that if we meet in ourselves and transmute in ourselves, don't have to play out externally in the world anymore. And so if enough people free themselves, then we can free more of the collective together. And that's the kind of tipping point. That's the critical mass that has been foretold for a long time of possibility. And so, that being said, I want to introduce two other concepts. I know I've been kind of bouncing around, and again, this is like some pretty heady stuff sometimes, and I hope that there's some nuggets of value that you received. I didn't know that I'd be doing this talk. I just felt the fear energy going up when Brother was talking about 5G and all these different things. And we need to hold that empowered, loving, non-victimization in the face of these things, because we do have the power to actually shift them. If we don't think that we have the power to change anything, we'll go into apathy, and we'll go into a self-destructive, unconscious self-destructive pathway. So the two concepts, one is, again, from an indigenous worldview, there was a deeper relationship with Earth and the cycles of time. Literally, civilizations that were formed that tracked the cosmic seasons, if you will. Like, just like we have seasons on Earth, they were like literally cosmic seasons that informed the whole culture to inform the empowerment of the individual. So entire civilizations previously to this one were all focused on individual empowerment. You becoming the greatest version of yourself as a divine being on earth. That was what the society and culture was for. We lost that over time, and we shifted into a time construct. Literally, the prime meridian is in Great Britain, guys. And the Gregorian calendar that was put in place was literally seeded. It was implemented. And the more dreamtime experience of the indigenous culture, which was relating to time in a very different way, what started to get weeded out, so to speak, on our planet. And so we have the opportunities, we shift these timelines, that we come into this empowered place to shift from time is money to time is art. From time is money to time is art. And this is a quote from Jose Aguilar's. So what would it be like to be a part of a world where you had all the time in the world that you need? Think about the time is money construct. There's the go, 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 there's the scarcity, there's the urgency, there's a sense of lack, there's a sense of impending doom for some people. But if you had eternity on this planet, they're like, yeah, you can be here for another 100 years. How would that shift how you relate to life? If you had as much time as you needed. So the illusion is that we've been conditioned into the idea that we're not eternal beings and that we have a finite amount of time and that essentially we're victims to outside forces. I'm here to interrupt that today and say that you are an eternal being with as much time as you need to create the preferred life and reality that you want to create to exemplify to humanity what is possible for their own freedom. And as we shift from time is money and being essentially a cog in the wheel or a slave to that energy, we can start to use that energy of game A and start to bring it into the eternal experience of time as art. That our creativity and the missions and the passions that we have are literally informing the new world that we want to experience. So if enough people are literally vibrating in their love, in their soul energy, their inspiration, their passion, their trust of life and what they came here to create, shifting out of victimization and empowerment of I can make a difference, I can create a better world, and I'm starting to choose it for myself now. And enough people do that, the external must shift. It has to, by the laws of the universe, the laws of attraction, based on how we're vibrating, based on how our emotional energy is moving through our nervous systems, which are the bridge between spirit and matter. The external has to reflect that. So that's the seed of positivity I want to plant in relating to these things that, again, we've already crossed the critical mass of people aware that there's a greater possibility of positivity on the planet. We've already crossed that threshold. And we're bombarded with information. We're bombarded with negative news. And so I want to encourage you guys to explore this possibility that may seem a little selfish from some certain spiritual paradigms, and that's fine. But I want to encourage you to be selfish in this really unique way of choosing your highest timeline of fulfillment as a soul, your most empowered reality. And if any of those conspiracies or any of these news streams or any of these things, be aware, but don't come into fear. And if you see fear arise, start to meet it and start to move it out of your body, out of your nervous system. Because we need empowered creators on the planet. And we need indigenous connection to move into time as art. And to have Gaia and the earth narrative of being in connection with her inform all the things that we're creating, the technologies we're creating, the kind of businesses we want to grow, the possibilities we have in this exponential time of change to use technology for good is so powerful. And so keep feeding those possibilities your energy. You can influence the creation with your consciousness. Make no mistake. So on that subject of new technology, on that subject of a highest timeline of fulfillment and more positive outcomes on the planet and indigenous worldviews, I want to call a dear brother up here, my brother Jai, for the last 5 minutes we have to talk about a blockchain that's being created that is an indigenously mindset coin. And he's going to share about that. So this isn't just like a bunch of intangible stuff. There are solutions that are embodying what I'm talking about, just like you probably experienced or you know of a project. So continue to explore. I wish I had more time to really expand upon this. I'm just trying to get some nuggets out, and I'm in the stream. I didn't plan this talk. And I really thank you for exploring with me today. And I love you so much.